Hey everyone, I'm Kyle Racki, and this is LTV. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking to Daniel Hebert, who is the Director of Sales at Proposify. We're going to be talking about rogue sales reps, the reps that won't follow a process but still get results. Are they people that you want to keep on your team, or should you let them go if the culture is at stake? That's what we're going to be talking about. Listen in as we have that chat. So let's talk about cowboys and cowgirls. In this series of episodes, we've talked a lot about hiring your first salespeople and building a sales process. And I think one of the hardest things to do is to try to create a process when you have a sales rep who might be crushing their numbers, but will not share any of their process and won't follow any process either. The eternal question is, do you keep them because they're selling? What are your thoughts?
So the lone wolf.
Yeah.
That's
the rebel without a cause.
The rebel without a cause.
They have a cause.
They have a cause.
Making money.
Yeah. It's an interesting topic because I think it all comes down to culture, right? Are they toxic for the culture or are they not? Because if they're not toxic to the culture and they're bringing in a lot more revenue than everybody else, as a sales leader, you kind of want that person in your back pocket because they're going to cover a lot of your target that you need to cover anyways. If they are a culture problem, then the question is, okay, what do you do with them, right? Do you let them go and hey, I'm going to be 30% short of my target this year because this person brought in, 30% of the target by themselves? Do you isolate them?
My perspective, I guess, as a CEO with a board that I report to is the idea that I think I've observed a lot of sales leaders kind of looking at, okay, I've got a nut to crack or I've got a number that I need to hit. So I'm going to pull out all the stops and use whatever leverage I can to hit that number, whether it means, shooting up my budget and overhiring, or, I'm relying on this renegade who's like doing 90% of all the sales people. That's really hard to report to a board because they're going to look at, okay, great, you guys hit your numbers, but now when you're planning next quarter or next year, the expectation is you can 10x that or 5x that or whatever. Internally you can't do that. If the CEO is even aware, you can't do that when you're relying so much on this unproven model of that person can leave at any time and go elsewhere. Now your numbers shoot down to 10%.
Yeah.
That's almost worse than not having the sales altogether.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Chris Orlob from Gong wrote a really, really interesting article probably around this time last year, and it was around the bell curve of your sales team. And you always have that top 20% that they're just going to figure it out and they're just going to bring in a lot of revenue. Some of them will be good for your company and some of them won't, but you can't actually grow a company based on these people, right? Because depending on the market that you're in, there might only be one or two in that market that you can hire, right? So it's how do you figure out a process that enables that fat 80% in the middle, right? Or 60%, or I forget what numbers he had. That's how you scale, and that's how you create repeatability, and that's what you want to show the board. But I get your perspective of I'm going to the board and do we let this person go that's bringing in $1 million a year when all my other reps are bringing in $400K a year? It's a hard justification, but then you also have to look at it from, if they're a renegade, it might work for a while. When will it stop? And then are they costing you more money than, bringing in more money? Because if there's problems with the team, high turnover rate because they're sitting next to this person, that has costs, right?
Yeah, there's a bit of that Rockstar mentality, I think, among those. They say in software, they call them 10x programmers, or the programmers that can do 10 times the average engineer. And so I'd think of them as the cowboy or the cowgirls being the 10x salesperson. They usually have an ego that goes along with it. And I think maybe especially in sales.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's, again, I bring it back to culture, right? It's, are they good for the culture or are they bad for the culture? Because at the same time, it's I forget which book I was reading, but they had this case study in there where, the sales team was complaining that the targets were set too high. So they went and hired a rogue salesperson and doubled the quota, but completely isolated them from the sales team, and just like the sales team didn't even know this person existed. They were working from home. They had their own process, their own book of business, and it was, okay, this is your number. You need to go and hit it. And that person hit it. And then they basically presented to the sales team, hey, you know what? You guys say that this quota is too high. This person just hit double that quota, right? So we can actually increase it. So there are like reasons why you want these people on your team, because they might be doing something that's completely different and not following the process, and it ends up being way better. I guess
the key is, are they going to share it?
Exactly.
Some don't want to.
So, but that, again, it comes back to culture. It's like, are they toxic? Are they willing to share? Do they have too much of an ego? Ego in sales can be really good if you can push it in the right direction, because it makes the person competitive. You know, they're really hard on themselves. They want to be the best. But if it's too much, then...
That's actually worth exploring more so. How important is ego among your sales reps, and at what point does it become too much?
Yeah. Take an example of our team. We have one rep that has just enough ego in sales, right? Talks about himself like very highly, like he's kind of joking around, like holding himself here. But he's also super competitive about it. So when he listens to a call and knows he made a mistake, that eats away at him, and he wants to be better. So it's a good type of ego that if you can push it in the right direction, he wants to be better than the other reps, which is kind of good because he pushes himself. But it's not so much that he's like, I'm better than you. It's more like, shit, I need to do better because I want to be better than them.
Yeah. It's like, to use the sports analogy, it's you don't want your rep to treat the other sales reps who are on their team as if they're on the competing team.
Totally.
Right? You're still on the same team. Even if you want to be the best on the team, you still need these people to like catch your passes.
Yeah.
And ultimately win as a team.
Yeah.
Like, and the company loses if only one rep wins and the other reps lose.
Yeah. No, for sure.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that discussion with Daniel. I'd love to know what your opinion is. Should you keep those rogue sales reps on your team? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit like and subscribe so more people can see this.
This episode of Lifetime Value is brought to you by Proposify. Proposify improves sales productivity so your team spends less time creating proposals and more time selling. Start your free trial at proposify.com. And be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a single episode.